You know the moment. You have lived inside it more than once, and it has a specific texture, the kind that doesn't announce itself with drama, but settles quietly, like dust after a storm. It is 2 in the morning, and the ceiling of your bedroom has become the only witness to a prayer that feels like it is bouncing back down before it reaches anywhere worth going. Or maybe it is the parking lot, engine running, hands still on the wheel, because going inside means performing again, performing okay, performing fine, performing the version of yourself that has not quietly given up on the thing God told you, the thing you once said out loud with confidence until the silence of heaven and the subtle skepticism of people you loved made you tuck it away like an embarrassing photograph. The math of your life does not add up. The promises feel dated. The dream has been privately buried because you ran out of energy to defend it. And somewhere underneath the "I'm trusting God" you say when people ask, there is a sound, not quite a cry, not quite a scream, that sounds more like, how much longer before I know I was not wrong about all of this? That question lives in your chest, the way grief lives, not loudly but permanently, occupying the background of every good moment, showing up at celebrations to remind you of what is still missing, arriving at church to sit beside you while the worship is beautiful and the sermon is powerful, and everyone around you seems to be receiving while you are standing in the same spot, wondering why the blessing everyone else appears to be touching keeps arriving just slightly beyond your reach. You pray harder, you fast, you journal, you repent again for the same thing because maybe that is the block. You serve more. You forgive the person who hurt you for the 6th time because maybe unforgiveness is the wall. And still, the door has not opened, and the silence does not speak. And you are starting to wonder with a terrifying quietness whether the silence means what you fear it means, that you were never as chosen as you believed, that God made a promise to someone else and you misread your name on it, that the delay has gone on long enough that it has crossed the line from divine timing into divine redirection, away from you towards someone more qualified, someone more consistent, someone less complicated by their history and their wounds and their private failures. That is the lie. And I need you to hear that with the full weight of what it means to call something a lie. Not a misunderstanding, not a partial truth, not a perspective that deserves gentle consideration. It is a lie constructed specifically for the architecture of your particular hope, tailored to the exact shape of what you were promised so that it fits perfectly over the promise like a shadow, blocking the light at the precise angle that makes the promise invisible. The delay is not punishment. The silence is not abandonment, and everything you have been reading as rejection has been catastrophically misread. Before you dismiss that as comfort language, before the familiar defense mechanism activates and tells you that this is what people always say to the ones who didn't make it, I need you to look at a specific verse, a specific word that changes the entire frame. In Luke 15, when the prodigal son is still a long way off, the father sees him, does not wait for him to arrive, sees him from a distance, and the father runs. And when the son arrives, still rehearsing his apology speech, the father interrupts him. Bring the best robe, the ring, the fattened calf, and do it quickly. That word, quickly, is the entire sermon, because it means the robe was already in the closet, already selected, already waiting on a specific hook. The calf had already been fattening for months. The party was not improvised. It was prepared. The father had been watching the horizon every single morning, not scrambling, not panicking, but arranging, setting the table. Your wilderness was not empty time. It was decoration time. That is why in the trilogy, The 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life, the link is in the pinned comment, I explain exactly how to identify the difference between a divine delay and a divine detour. because that distinction is the hinge everything else turns on. When you understand that the preparation period is not a waiting room, but a throne room under construction, you stop trying to escape the season and start extracting every piece of equipment it was designed to give you. The three keys are not motivation. They are not inspiration. They are specific, biblical, structurally sound principles that change how you read silence, how you carry promise, and how you position your life for the arrival of what God has already set in motion. Go to the pinned comment, study it, because what I am about to tell you in the next paragraphs will make far more sense with that foundation underneath it. There is a Hebrew word, eth, found in Esther 4:14. Most translations render it as such a time as this, and most sermons treat it as a general reference to season, to timing, to the idea that everything happens for a reason. But eth does not mean a general season. It is not the Hebrew word for an era or a chapter or even a period of time in the ordinary sense. Eth means a specific, singular divine appointment, a moment that was carved out of eternity before time began, with your name engraved on the inside, not printed, not labeled, engraved the way you engrave something that is permanent and personal and not transferable, not approximately now, not in the general vicinity of this decade, this exact juncture. The reason that matters is because the enemy's most effective weapon against a chosen person is not destruction, it is delay plus doubt. He cannot stop what God ordained. But if he can convince you long enough that you missed your window, that the moment passed while you were in your mess, that God revised the plan because your faithfulness was inconsistent, then you disqualify yourself from the inside. You do not miss the appointment because God withdrew it. You miss it because you stopped showing up in the posture of someone who still has one. And the posture shift is everything. There is a difference, a physical, embodied, spiritually detectable difference between someone waiting in dread and someone waiting in readiness. Dread tightens the chest and rounds the shoulders and keeps one eye always on the past, calculating all the ways this could still go wrong, rehearsing the disappointment before it arrives so that the blow will be softer. Readiness straightens the spine. Readiness clears the table. Readiness begins to make room for what is coming because it believes at a cellular level that something is actually coming. The father in Luke 15 was not sitting in grief, frozen by the absence of his son, unable to function until the return happened. He was watching the horizon with expectation, and the household ran with the energy of someone who had already begun the preparations. That is the frequency God is calling you into right now. Not the frequency of, I hope this is true, but the frequency of, I am clearing the shelf because the package is already in transit. What the enemy understood and moved aggressively against is that a person who knows their worth to God and their specific assignment in the earth is nearly impossible to neutralize. He cannot use offense against you if you have forgiven. He cannot use lack against you if you know who your provider is. He cannot use failure against you if you have understood grace. So his remaining tools are almost entirely psychological. The whisper that says you are a fraud, the quiet accusation that if people could see the private version of you, they would revoke your anointing. The suggestion that the chosen ones are more spiritually disciplined than you are, more consistent, less complicated, and that God is working through your theology but working around your character because your character has not yet earned the promise. That voice sounds like discernment. It dresses itself in scripture and uses the language of accountability. But there is a line the Spirit of God does not cross. He convicts to restore, never to destroy. Conviction leaves you on your feet and points you toward the door. Condemnation puts you on the floor and locks the door from the outside. If the voice inside you is making you feel beyond reach, beyond repair, beyond qualification, that voice is not the Holy Spirit, regardless of how spiritual it sounds. Look at the record. because the record does not lie and it does not make exceptions for the people it finds inconvenient. David was an adulterer. David was a murderer. He orchestrated the death of a loyal soldier to cover his own shame, and he did it deliberately. God called him a man after his own heart and gave him a kingdom and wrote his name into the eternal lineage of the Messiah. The woman at the well had 5 husbands and was living outside covenant with a 6th man. Jesus did not whisper to her from a distance. He sat down across from her in the full heat of the day, personally, and gave her the most direct theological conversation recorded in the Gospel of John. She left that well and became the first evangelist, the first person to bring an entire city to the feet of Jesus. Zacchaeus was not a minor sinner. He was a traitor, a Jewish man collecting taxes for the Roman Empire and skimming extra for himself. Despised by his own people, excluded from his own community. Jesus did not invite him down from the tree to explain his disappointment. He invited himself to dinner. The party went to Zacchaeus' house that night, not to the house of the religious, not to the house of the qualified, but to the house of the one nobody else would touch. Paul authorized the murder of Christians. He was present and approving when Stephen was stoned to death. He was on his way to imprison more followers of Jesus when the light hit him on the Damascus road. And God, looking at that resume, looking at that history, chose him to write approximately half the New Testament, to plant churches across the known world, to articulate the theology of grace with a precision that still shapes every sermon preached on this planet 2,000 years later. God's specialty throughout all of Scripture, without exception, without a single counterexample, is throwing parties for people who do not deserve them. That is the entire mechanism of grace. If you deserved it, it would be wages. If you earned it, it would be payment. Grace means He gives you what your performance could never unlock, not because He overlooked your record, but because He looked directly at it and decided that His plan was bigger than your history, and that the glory of what He was about to do in your life would be amplified, not diminished, by the contrast between where you came from and where He was taking you. So if the voice that has been disqualifying you is using your past, your inconsistency, your failures, your private record of not being the person you publicly appear to be, then hear this clearly. Your unworthiness is not the obstacle. Your unworthiness is precisely what sets the stage. The more impossible the gap between where you are and where God said you are going, the more undeniable it becomes that the hand that moved you was not your own. You do not become worthy and then receive the blessing. You receive the blessing and then understand, standing inside it, that worthy was never the criterion. Love was. There is a particular kind of loneliness that is not about the absence of people, but about the presence of distance, the distance between you and the people sitting closest to you. You can be at the family dinner table, surrounded by faces you have known your entire life, plates full and laughter moving through the room, and feel a coldness that the warm food cannot touch. It is not that you do not love them. It is that something in you recognizes, with a clarity that is both gift and grief, that you are not living on the same frequency. They are not wrong. You are not superior, but you have been called to something. You have been built differently, and that difference, that slight and undeniable variation in the way you perceive reality, in the things that move you, in the questions you cannot stop asking while they are satisfied with the standard answers, creates a gap at the table that nobody names and everyone feels. You smile, you pass the bread. You answer the questions about your life with the polished summary that doesn't include the midnight crying or the parking lot math. And when the meal is over and you are driving home, the loneliness is louder than it was before you arrived. You have learned to perform belonging in rooms where you do not fully belong. You have learned to make your presence comfortable for people who would not know what to do with your full presence. This is not bitterness. This is observation. And the observation has a spiritual explanation that nobody in that room would give you. You are carrying a light that disturbs the darkness in people you love. Not because you are better than them, because darkness, even generational, inherited, unnamed darkness, instinctively reacts to proximity with light. It is not personal, it is physics, but it feels personal every single time. It feels like the rejection it is dressed in. It feels like the critical comment from your mother about your choices, or the silence from your father where encouragement should live, or the look exchanged between relatives when you talk about your dreams, the look that says nothing out loud and says everything with the corners of the eyes, the slight shift of posture, the almost imperceptible tension that tells you once again that you are too much, that you are reaching too far, that you should lower your frequency so that the room can stay comfortable. There is something that happens in the body when you receive that look enough times. A compression, a learned smallness that begins in the chest and slowly colonizes the spine. The shoulders learn to preemptively curve. The voice learns to drop its volume before the sentence is finished. The hands learn to gesture less because they have been met with too much stillness. The body absorbs the message that the world keeps sending, be less, be quieter, be more like us, and it begins to comply, not because you agree, but because the energy of resistance is exhausting and the relief of invisibility is real. You tell yourself it is humility. Sometimes it sounds like wisdom, not casting your pearls, not oversharing, discerning your audience. And sometimes those things are true, but sometimes the smallness is not discernment, it is damage. And the work of God in this season is not simply to open the door to your destiny, but to undo the shrinking, to call you back to the full stature of who He made you before the repeated rejections taught your body to apologize for itself. This is where Joseph lives in the story, and I need you to feel this, because it is not a metaphor, it is a mirror. Joseph was thrown into a pit by the people who should have celebrated him. His brothers, his family, his blood, the people at his dinner table, looked at the coat his father gave him and saw evidence of favoritism instead of evidence of a specific calling. The coat did not make Joseph better than his brothers. The coat made visible what was already true, that something in Joseph was oriented toward a future that his environment was not designed to contain. And the response of his environment was not blessing. It was rejection. It was betrayal. It was the hands of the people closest to him, stripping away the symbol of his calling and selling him into the very circumstances that looked like the absolute negation of everything God had promised him. And here is what the text records in the silence of Genesis, that the Lord was with Joseph. Not that the Lord was watching Joseph from a distance, not that the Lord was taking notes and planning to intervene eventually. The Lord was with Joseph in the pit. The Lord was with Joseph in Potiphar's house. The Lord was with Joseph in the prison. Every stripping away of what looked like the promise was a hidden layer of preparation. Every loss was a deposit. Every betrayal was a curriculum that could not have been taught any other way. The throne room in Egypt required a Joseph who had been in the pit first, because the wisdom to rule could only be forged in the exact fire that his family's rejection had lit. As I teach deeply in the material, The 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life, I left the link for you in the pinned comment. This pain is not incidental. The rejection you have carried from the people who should have been your first source of belonging is not a wound that runs parallel to your calling. It is woven into the fabric of it. The misunderstanding of family, the loneliness at the table, the isolation that felt like abandonment. It is the very furnace in which the specific resilience required for your assignment was tempered. Gold does not enter the furnace as punishment. It enters because the fire removes what does not belong, and what is coming requires a version of you that could only be produced by the exact heat you have been standing in. David knew what it felt like to kill a lion and a bear in the field and have that testimony dismissed by his own father when the prophet came looking for the anointed one. Jesse did not think to call David. He presented his other sons, the taller ones, the more impressive ones, the ones who looked like kings from the outside, and left the youngest in the field with the sheep. And God said to Samuel, "Do not look at his height. Do not look at his appearance. Do not use the measurement system that the world uses, because the world measures the exterior and I look at the heart." David was the last person anyone in that room would have chosen. He was the last person his own father considered when the word anointed was spoken. And he was the one God had already seen on that hill with the sheep, singing in the darkness with nobody watching, worshipping with the same intensity in front of a flock as he would eventually worship in front of a nation, because the audience was never the reason for the sound. It was simply who he was. The criticism that came wrapped in advice. The family member who said you were too sensitive, too idealistic, too much in your head, too disconnected from reality, and the way it was delivered with such genuine concern that you almost could not argue with it, because arguing with concern sounds ungrateful. You would receive it. You would turn it over in your mind for days, testing it against your own self-knowledge, wondering if they were right, if the pattern of disappointment in your life was evidence that your calibration was off, that the sensitivity was a liability rather than a gift, that the big vision was delusion rather than calling. And the insidious thing about that kind of input, delivered with affection by people who genuinely love you in the limited way they know how to love, is that it does not just wound your confidence, it borrows your own voice to deliver the wound. After enough repetition, you begin to say it to yourself. You become the one questioning your own calibration. You don't need them in the room anymore because you have memorized the script. The Jesus parallel is almost too direct to ignore, and I say almost because I think the reason it feels uncomfortable is that we have been taught to treat Jesus as categorically other, so holy, so separate, so divine, that his experience of rejection does not quite land in the same register as ours. But consider, he came to his own, and his own received him not. His own family at one point went to retrieve him because they thought he had lost his mind. The religious leaders of his own people, the ones who should have been the most equipped to recognize what was standing in front of them, looked at him and called his power demonic. The city that should have been his greatest celebration called for his death. And in the wilderness, before any of the public ministry began, the enemy came to him specifically around identity. If you are the Son of God, if. The attack was not primarily on his power, it was on his knowledge of who he was. Because the enemy understood then and understands now that a person fully settled in their identity is unreachable. You cannot tempt someone who knows what they already have. The wilderness was not the enemy winning a round. The wilderness was the proving ground where the settledness of the identity was tested and held. And then, only then, the ministry began. You have survived things that should have broken you. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it is easy to look at your survival as ordinary, as the baseline expectation, as simply what people do, but it is not ordinary. The specific combination of what was placed on you, the family dynamics, the inherited silence, the dreams that felt confirmed and then felt abandoned, the relationships that opened and broke, the prayers that went into the dark and did not echo back. That combination was designed to produce one of two results: either the destruction of everything God placed in you, or the forging of it into something so solid and specific that it could carry the weight of what is coming. You are still here, which means the second result is what happened. You are not the same person who entered the pressure. Nobody is. But the question is not whether the pressure changed you. The question is whether the change produced iron or rubble. And the fact that you are still reaching, still asking, still caring enough to wonder if you missed it, that is not the behavior of rubble. That is the posture of iron that has forgotten it is iron. God does not waste curriculum. Every false start, every closed door, every relationship that ended before you understood why, every season where you felt profoundly unwitnessed, it was all being catalogued, all being metabolized, all being converted into the specific capacity you will need for what is directly ahead of you. The book of Job is not primarily a story about suffering. It is a story about what suffering cannot take from a person who is rooted. And the conversation at the end, where God speaks from the whirlwind, is not an explanation. God does not explain the suffering. He expands the frame. He shows Job a universe so vast and specific and intricate that the question, "Why did this happen to me?" is not answered so much as it is overwhelmed by the sheer immensity of what was always operating in the background. Job's restoration was not the point of the story. Job's encounter with the living God, face to face, voice to voice, in a dimension that his suffering created the access point for, was the point. The double portion came after, but the encounter came through. There is a warning embedded in the story of Lot's wife that does not get enough weight, and I want to give it the full weight it deserves here, because it is alive and relevant in the exact transition you are standing in. The angels were specific. Do not look back, not as a suggestion, as an instruction with a consequence attached. And she looked back. And the commentary from most Sunday school lessons treats this as a story about disobedience. She was told not to, and she did. End of story. But I think the looking back was not primarily defiance. I think it was grief. I think she was not looking back with longing for the sin itself, but with longing for the life she had built inside it. The familiarity, the belonging, the specific texture of the community she had known, the faces she would never see again. And the grief was so immediate and so embodied that the backward look happened before the choice was fully conscious. And God, in his gravity and his mercy simultaneously, made the consequence unmistakable. To turn back, even in grief, to the fire that he has delivered you from, is to become as static and lifeless as the landscape you are leaving. The approvals you were addicted to, the people who could make you feel real with a look, who could make your dream feel legitimate with their endorsement, whose silence felt like death, those people are behind you now. Some of them were removed by circumstance, some were removed by conflict, some just quietly faded as you moved into the new frequency. And the temptation in this moment is to look back, not necessarily to return, but to check, to see if they are watching your progress, to see if they have noticed, to see if the success that is coming will finally produce the recognition that the love and the loyalty and the gifting never produced. Do not look back, not because they are wicked, not because what you built there had no beauty, but because the looking back is not neutral. The looking back re-anchors you to the approval grid. It makes their witness a requirement for your reality. And a person whose reality requires outside witness is not yet free enough for what God has built at the destination. The fire behind you was real, and the mercy of God moved you out of it. Let it be behind you. The chains you are breaking are not only yours. This is the part that needs to be said plainly, because it carries a weight beyond personal healing. The patterns you are interrupting in yourself, the silence, the smallness, the performance, the addiction to approval, the way love was confused with control in the family system you came from. Those patterns have roots that go back further than your parents. They were inherited. They were modeled. The people who modeled them had them modeled to them in turn, by people who were also surviving, also coping, also doing the best they knew how to do inside a system that was itself broken. You are not the first person in your lineage to carry this, but you may be the first person to see it clearly enough to choose differently, and that choosing, That specific, costly, disorienting work of identifying the inherited pattern and refusing to pass it forward is not only personal transformation, it is generational surgery. The children who come after you, biological or spiritual, will enter a different inheritance because of what you are doing right now, in this season, in this wilderness that felt like punishment and has been, all along, preparation. Solitude has been your companion for so long that you may have made a treaty with it, the kind of treaty that people make with pain when it has stayed long enough to become familiar. Not welcome, not desired, but known. And the known, however uncomfortable, carries a safety that the unknown does not. You have learned who you are in the aloneness. You have learned what you believe when nobody is watching to evaluate your belief. You have learned the sound of your own voice in the dark, which is a thing that many people never learn because they are never alone long enough to hear it. That learning was not incidental. The version of you that knew how to perform belonging in rooms where you did not belong was a necessary survival tool for the season you were in. But it is not the tool the next season requires. The next season requires a person who has discovered that their realness is not dependent on an audience. And you have done that work, even if you do not yet recognize it as the gift it is. The new tribe is already in motion. I want you to hold this with both hands because it is not sentiment, it is architecture. Ecclesiastes 4 says that two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. God does not call you out of the false belonging without preparing the true belonging. He does not clear the table without planning a feast. The people who are coming toward you right now, who are being positioned, who are finishing their own wilderness seasons, who have been broken open in the specific ways that produce the specific capacity to see you fully and remain, they exist. They are not theoretical. They are in process. And the meeting point is ahead, not behind. But here is the condition that almost nobody names. The meeting point requires you to arrive as the person you have become in the wilderness, not the person you were before you entered it. The stripped down, cleared out, identity settled version of you, the one who no longer needs to be the most impressive in the room, the one who can be seen without performing, the one who has learned that love does not require your shrinking. That is the version your new tribe is looking for. That is the version the covenant relationships are calibrated to receive. God has been doing something in the hidden place that your public life does not yet reflect. He has been aligning circumstances that converged without your engineering, opening doors in rooms you did not know existed, having conversations about you in dimensions you cannot access, preparing hearts you have not yet met to receive the specific gift that you specifically carry. Ephesians 2:10 calls you his workmanship. The Greek word is poema, from which we get the English word poem. You are not a rough draft. You are not a work in progress in the sense of incomplete and therefore insufficient. You are a poem being written with the full intentionality of the greatest author who has ever existed. And every word he has placed in you has been chosen, not accidentally included, not approximately right, but precisely right for the specific message he intends to speak through your life to the specific people your life will touch. The revision seasons, the losses, the